Meeting account, this is priorities, policy and priorities committee meeting order for Monday, January 15th, 2018. And approval of the agenda, I'm going to vary the agenda because our delegation is going to be a little late. So we'll move 5.1 to the end. After 7.3. Approval of the agenda is amended. Kirby, Scott, all in favor? Minutes. We go right down to 7.1. Pre-approval of the community center replacement of weight room equipment. The recommendation.
Recommendation the council would pre-approve funds in the 2018 capital budget in the amount of $29,500 to replace the old and damaged weight room equipment.
Okay. Discussion on that? I don't, just want, I mean, I see that it's 93, everything was bought in 93, so it's pretty old stuff. Is it all wear out at the same time?
Pretty similar to everything else when you buy everything at the same time. A lot of it has the same life expectancy. But I don't think the treadmill's from 93. I think it's a little bit newer than that. The treadmill definitely needs to be replaced along with a number of items.
I was wondering if anyone's interested in seeing a report on how many people actually utilize the weight room. And I know I'm down there picking up grandchildren from the daycare, and it never looks like it's overly busy at certain times of the day or when I'm dropping them. So is it essential that these here pieces of equipment be replaced? Like, are there additional treadmills, or is this something that is an essential need?
From reading the report, a lot of it was safety issues.
Mhm. And
being replaced.
yeah, and I've seen an alternate recommendation of removing the unsafe components. And I was just wondering if we, take out the pieces of equipment that aren't safe, if that would be sufficient, or if we do need to replace and determine how many of the items are used, or, there's a weight for them, or anything like that.
Anybody else?
I'd be in favor of approving it in the pre-approval portion of it, and you could, ask staff for maybe next meeting to bring back some information on, the amount of people that utilize the gym and stuff like that. I do remember from our first budget discussion we had for the very first council that was the only place in the rec center that made money. Of all the facilities in the rec center, that's the only one that makes money. And we had talked about at that time, perhaps we should expand on that if that's the one that's making money. So if that has changed in 3 years, I don't know, but I would assume that it's probably likely in the same boat. This is the first time in the 4 years that I've been here that I don't think that we've done anything for it. So to me, it's likely something in the community that's well utilized. Perhaps the time down there is not well utilized, but I'd be good with approving it now and then seeing what we've got for additional costs later on.
Scott?
I think this also depends on when you're there, because I don't like shift changes earlier in the morning and late at night. It can get pretty busy there. And when we're talking safety related issues like chairs and benches and bars that are bent, those things I don't think we have an option on. I think they need to replace, but maybe some of the other items, I don't know. But definitely a little bit of an upgrade is needed in there.
Ready? All in favor? Opposed? Your Days Society annual request. For information. Busy?
I'd like to move for discussion.
Okay. Seconder. Busy? All in favor? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. It looks like the Tierra Days Society is actually looking for us to give some kind of answer on their fee for their in-kind and the fee for service. So to move forward, the society needs to be able to go ahead and put that. So they need to know that the district will once again this year be backing them up for that in-kind service.
I know myself, I got some questions for the fee for service, but the in-kind I thought was kind of what the staff was looking for. Councilman Kai?
Yeah, the in-kind, it's been kind of estimated at $40,000, and if it was to be given, remove the, I guess what we've been doing in the past is just using staff and equipment to the $40,000 level. And if we're not gonna be doing that, then does that make this grant at $50,000 underfunded? I mean, $40,000 has to be marked somewhere, whether it's in-kind or what else would it be if it's not that add to this grant?
Well, the in-kind donation was $40,000. That's where this number came from.
Right, and it's to do with labor and equipment.
Yeah.
So if that was no longer being asked for, what would,
Well, they'll be able to hire their own people to do that work, rather depending on the town to do it.
and does that change the grant amount from 50 to 90,000? Because now they will have the cash to pay someone else, rather than, there would be no more in kind.
The in-kind is separate from the fee for service. The in-kind is $40,000.
Yeah.
And that's to pay for the setup. And they do that themselves now. We do. The district isn't involved.
Okay. Yeah.
They can hire the district if they want to, but it'd be up to them. Councilor Scott.
I think this year will be the first transition year of it moving away from the district, so I think this year will be a year for them to obtain actual hours and set up costs and stuff like that. And right now, I think the only kind they're looking for is the actual stage setup. Because there has been district stuff that is set up and tents, and some of those are components that only district has done. Last year, I think that there was a breakdown of hours and
There's still
so
some
that
in here,
for
too.
them to be able to set a price on, the things that were fee for services. And then I was a little bit concerned where we have the highlights on the legal considerations and the risk, because to me, our golf course, Monk Manor V, any of those things on district property would be the same as, litigation risks that we're putting on GrisFest. And then a lot of there's a lot of assets that are at GrisFest as well. The ducking, maple, there's a lot of things that the district has been using as well, the things that GrisFest has accumulated over the years. So I think this will be a huge transition year to make that break away from the district.
So this, I get you right, Councilor Kirby, you wanted to separate the two.
Well, I think what the society is looking for is to move ahead with the planning and the organizing of the festival for next year. There's a change because the district wanted the separation, so this year the board has separated all the duties that used to be carried on by the community center as far as preparing all the grants and stuff. So this is a learning curve for them. So they need to have the support of the district early this year, like a letter of support so they can go for those grants, where in previous years that was just something always that was done by someone in the department. And I'm not exactly sure what time. Like, it would have been nice to kind of have a report there from Joy on timelines of what they used to do down there. But so this will be the difference is just getting those kind of things in order for this year. And just, I mean, if they know that they can count on the district as with the in-kind, then they can move ahead, and they are requesting a grant in aid this year also. But if we could make a decision on the in-kind tonight and a letter of support, then that would be really beneficial to the group.
Do you want to make a motion?
Sure. I'd like to recommend that council approves the in-kind for GrisFest 2018 and offer a letter of support for grants.
Any other discussion on it? Councillor Hutz.
The in-kind is the $40,000 cash in lieu of, right?
right?
And then they're gonna come back and look for $50,000 grant
Yeah,
aid.
yeah.
So it'll be a total donation of $90,000 by the district of Tumbler Ridge. And then they will come back in and say, we want the town employees to put up porta potties and set up the stages and this and that, and they'll pay us to do that, or they're gonna look for that in kind again. So I look at $90,000, we collect about $1 million in residential taxes, and we're gonna give about 9% of our money away to one music festival. Residential taxes to kind of put it dollar for dollar. Seems like a lot of money to me for one instance. I'd like to have some better information on what it actually brings back into the community for hotels, visitor sales, gas sales, grocery stores, this type of stuff. Is the investment of $90,000 worth it? That's what to me, you get into a slippery slope. Now we're giving $90,000. They come back in, they say, oh, we want the stage set up, we want this set up, we want this. When did that waters get muddied again, and now all of a sudden the district starts doing all this stuff for free for them, and they're getting $90,000. So, just seems like a lot of money to me for one event in Tumbler Ridge.
Councillor Scott.
I just want to make one comment on the, up till last year, as far as I know, 80% of the program coordinator's job description was assisting in the grants and stuff like that for BizFest. And the directors and stuff like that have taken over a lot of the stuff that used to have a paid employee doing. So, and then this year, like they had put the request in November, it came before us, asking, you know, for support to go ahead with the event. And it's just coming to us now. And they went ahead in good faith and pre-sold, like it's on page 18 here. 121 pre-sales through the Encana Center. Last year there were 786 according to the stats that were floated from the community center. And that was about 15.4% of last year's ticket sales. So like they, in good faith, moved forward trying to promote this event that does bring a lot of out-of-town people to here. And we get all excited about a couple of tour buses coming from somewhere, you know, to support the geopark. And here's an event that has been going on in Tumbler Ridge for, this will be the 17th year. So I guess we could, you know, pool businesses and see on that weekend how many extra people come into Tumbler Ridge. But there are a lot of tourists that have been supporting this event.
I guess my only concern, I have $40,000 for the set and all that. I don't have that problem with that, but if they can't put it on, we're gonna okay that, and they can't put it on without the rest of it. Okay, it is, as the council house said, it's $90,000 spent on that weekend, and that's an issue with me. I like the idea that they came here and they sat here and said that they're gonna promote local and have local people attend it now, and there's gonna be some, I can't remember exactly what they said, but they're gonna make it more local, better for the locals, put it that way. So, you know, I like that part of it, but I still want to talk about that $50,000 thing. I have problems with that, a $90,000 bill for one weekend. So, Councilor Kirby.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I'm not mistaken, I actually think that they wanted the stage set up and the beer garden tent outside of that $40,000 because they really need to see what it takes to set that up. I don't think the district can ever not set that tent up just with insurances and such. So just to make that clear, the $40,000 is outside of the two large tent setups. Also, you know, looking at this event that's gone on for 15 years and wondering why it's not growing, I think it's because of where it's situated. And the group has put together a really good plan on future use or future GrisFest on having its own permanent site. And that would be where the turbine, where the loadout is right now. That piece of property is zoned for recreation, and we are going to be making some money off of that laydown site, and that money has to be put back into recreation. And so looking forward, if at some point we could have a fairground, and I know we do have a shelf-ready proposal, but that fairground was, I think, kind of blown way out. It was with equestrian and stables, but if we started out with just a fenced area, you know, and then move on to just permanent stage there, that takes away so much setup. And then that area can be used by so many different groups. So this group is looking forward and looking at a strategic plan that makes this event more feasible. Because really, it is the one event that Tumbler Ridge has had, you know, it's an annual event, the longest running, that does bring in the most outside participation. And I don't think we can grow it unless we get behind it. And I know it seems like the district is, you know, why are we funding 90? Well, this was a district event to start with. Let's not forget that. This was an event that was started as Grizzly Valley Days. So if we want to continue it on, then the district has to be behind it. And it, you know, in our strategic plans, it says to grow our events and make them, you know, a bigger draw. So I think we really got to look at it, see what the TR Day Society can do this year. I know they've already started by getting a lot more of the local nonprofits involved, and that's going to be a bonus, I think. And I think, you know, just you don't want to give up on it, because as soon as that event is done, then we're losing anybody coming into town on the long weekend. They'll make other arrangements. So, just something to think about.
Councillor Casey?
Thank you, Worship. I'm just wondering, is there a specific motion on the floor?
Yes.
Yes.
Could I just have that repeated back to us?
That council approves the in-kind for Grizzfest 2018 and offer a letter of support for grants, and it was seconded.
Okay, thank you.
So out of the in-kind money that we'd be giving them under this motion, we would also pay for the setup of the tents and stuff, or they would pay us back out of the $40,000 we're gonna give them for the tents? That's the part I'm not real clear on. Because to me, it'd be 50, 40, and then if the tents cost $10,000 to put up, now we're down that slippery slope of now we're at $100,000. Exact reason why I think it should be one number done. That's the part that's unclear to me why I'm not.
I think the setup, yeah, the 40 in kind was outside of, like, the tents would still be set up by the district.
Would they pay the district to set it up?
I think. Well, I guess if
Want me
that
to
was.
answer? He's looking at me.
What's that? If you got an answer, go ahead.
What we are asking for is the stage and the tent setup. Simply because we have no idea those costs. We've asked for those. I've been on the board for 7 years. 7 years I've asked for those breakdowns. 7 years go by, still don't know. No idea what it costs. This year, this is what we're asking for is pretty much what it cost last year. We're starting with about the same in the bank, and we're asking for the same in the district. So it's all about the same. It's not gonna cost us less money to put it on going forward. Why would it cost us less? If anything, it costs more going forward. Things don't go down in price, they go up. So we said that this 1 year that we would ask for the tents and the stage. And if we could get a full breakdown of what that costs going forward, then for 2019, we will know exactly what it costs, so we can budget what it costs. If it costs $5,000 to put up the stage, okay, we know what that costs, there you go. We pay the district, they set it up.
So what we're talking about here is in kind plus the tents set up.
Yes.
Any more discussion on it? All in favor? Opposed?
Is council making a decision on the grant and aid today, or?
No, I thought we were gonna do that. Get started. Okay, I guess we'll go back to 5.1, seeing that gentleman's here. Great, is it?
That's great.
Yeah, welcome to the
Thank you.
delegation table.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. And this is also my two resource managers, also Marianne Johnson and Mark Van Tassel. And my full name is Greg Van Dola, the district manager in Peace.
I was gonna kind of do this a little different, as you know, there's a lot of interest here. So, we'll let you talk, and then, council can ask questions, and then after that, I'll have a question and answer period, and, it'd be nice if you could, put those to your, whoever your head of your delegation is, like the head of the clubs or whatever, if you could, but if not, we'll, would that be okay with you?
Yeah, that's fine. I can do a really brief summary if that would serve everybody, and then it kind of gets us up to the same place, and then we can go for question and answers. That would work for us, for sure.
Okay. And council's okay with that idea? Okay. Alrighty.
Okay,
Go
so we're probably timelines is probably sometime in the late fall. It had been identified that the Wolverine Forest Service Road, which actually is also the entrance point to one of the main Rexon trails, or one of the trails that's specifically used for snowmobiling and other events, and the road in itself doesn't have as many issues, but the bridges in there have significant issues. And one of the aspects, and Mark was up here, I don't know, about probably 2-3 weeks ago, and had a conversation around the direction of which the district and myself as a decision maker there, was that we were considering how we would have to restrict at that time access to the to that road, and to obviously what that would mean to the recreational opportunity. The bridges in themselves, there's the two. There's one at I don't know, I think it's 32.5 and 34. Roughly in that neck of the woods, and so they're in really rough shape. And so Mark spent a considerable amount of time at that previous meeting discussing, what a Forest Service road is versus what is how they're maintained and how they're not maintained based on industrial activity and that type of thing, and permitting and all those. So I think from that standpoint, the district has been in the process of from year to year to year, we've asked for funding from the province to maintain those bridges, and if they don't hit the level of priority required by the province to continue funding that, and that would be a normal process of how all these types of roads that go from being an industrial active road where we have permit holders and being maintained, to where eventually those type of roads end up being deactivated, or so that virtually it restricts access. And anybody that's been in the out in the bush a lot will recognize the difference when they deactivate. They create ditching all the way along, and it creates opportunities for water not to pond and those type of things. So at that point, we've had the conversation in the district that there is a safety issues on these bridges. And it was confirmed as of early as this last week that one of the aspects of the district and I was looking at was around, could we at least allow access by snowmobile and ATV across those bridges, that type of thing, and then at least we could open up the trail. We could, we've created the barriers so people couldn't go across the bridges and those type of things. And so the aspect around that was like I say, as early as this last week, we received an email saying that the engineering company that was willing to look at them said that they would not be allowed to have that type of an access, because the loading level for those bridges wouldn't even sustain snowmobile access or ATV access in a safe manner. So it puts the district manager, myself, in a really precarious position where I've got to think about the greater good in aspects of the safety of all people that would potentially go back there, and that type of thing. So we've effectively closed the road at this point, and also in a conversation with Trevor and from Rexon Trail, they've actually now closed the trail down back there until we can kind of come up with a suitable alternative, and that closure will last for the entire winter. And so that's the position that the district's in right now. It was one that I would rather not be in. I would rather have the opportunity to continue to use those bridges and the trail, and allow the access back, for the public to go and utilize those, but it puts us in a real precarious position when in fact I have to consider the safety of everyone, and it's not just people necessarily just within Tumbler Ridge that are today here and having these conversations about, this is the issue. It's we get a lot of other additional folks from Alberta coming in that would have no knowledge of, that there would be any concern, and that would be another concern for us to consider. So that's kind of a bit of a summary as far as I can see it in terms of where we are today. And I guess the only thing I would say is we are investigating other options and alternatives. Potentially there is some, money would make the big difference. It'd be a very expensive to actually get those bridges back up and running, but it's one of those conversations that we always are looking for additional funding on an annual basis. Every year about this time, we start our business planning and looking at what we can come up with additional funding. And, there's rural dividend fund, there's different opportunities that, maybe there's some options there, but, we need to start exploring those type of things, but it won't do much for us through the rest of this winter because there's just no way we can actually initiate or implement anything that quick. So I'll leave it at that and go for that from questions.
I just want to thank you for, we talked in Vancouver there, and I didn't understand quite what you were talking about because I didn't even know there was an issue at that time. But obviously there is. And I just want to say that kind of what you said today was, we want to work with you, try to solve this, and rather than beat down, so. Councilor Hall.
So you said there'd be a cost if we were able to fix up the bridges and that. Do you have an estimate of what it would cost?
Yeah, you know what, I can go with a
I know
wild.
it's a government estimate, so it's gonna be high.
Yeah, I can go with a wild ass guess, I guess, if you want to go from there. But typically, we're only looking at 2 bridges, which I think there's 5 to get all the way to the back end in that. And you're probably looking at least somewhere in about $200,000 dollars to probably look at the first 2 bridges even. And that's not to say that it could be higher. And that's the challenge until you actually. One of the things that Trevor is looking at right now, because the province, we determined here about 2-3 weeks ago after Mark's meeting, we redirected some funding towards Rexon Trail. Not a lot, about $20,000. Start to do a bit of a workup on what this might look like, and so originally we thought, well, we have this engineering estimate to be able to allow the ATVs and snowmobiles in, and I believe that his conversation now is to talk around how do we do some type of a feasibility to figure out exactly your question. What would it cost to get back there? Because those 2 bridges are definitely a problem. There's an additional bridges back there that we don't think may make it through the winter, to the spring freshet.
The reason I ask is we just received a letter. Are we allowed to talk about that letter that Melanie sent us today? Is that public knowledge? The folks that are coming in. So we're constantly getting messages and emails from people in government in British Columbia saying how great the geopark is and what a great thing that you've created in Tumbler Ridge, and this is going to save the world and everything else. But if we were able to go with them with that type of information and say, listen, yeah, our great geopark is here. Now we need $200,000 to fix up a road so we can access the geopark. So put your money where your mouth is. If we're able to take that type of information and go back to the government, that's in my mind, that's what this council is here to do, is to try to keep that open. I mean, it solves 2 birds with 1 stone. It helps our geopark grow, but also the actual people in Tumbler Ridge that utilize the area, the actual people that pay the taxes in town that don't really get anything out of the geopark, they get access to the areas they want to go to. So if that's the ask, if that's what we need to go in, that it would be good to have a number that we can go into the government, to our sources in the government or Jordan's sources, and say, this is where we're at. You want to get on the feel-good train of the geopark? You need $400,000.
Yeah.
You got to fix up the roads. Because this is road 1.
Yeah.
Right? There's lots of other roads that are damaged in the area that this could be this year. Next year you guys start shutting down the road to Canuso Falls or wherever else.
So from the from my perspective, like I indicated earlier, we're at a place where we exhaust our opportunities for what we refer to as our base funding that we receive from government. In terms of that, right?
Yeah.
So this is something that is above and beyond that. And now that's the district, we're willing to work with the community in itself to try. Like I say, there's rural dividend funds. There's all kinds of different opportunities out there that we work towards getting something that works together. And we're definitely in that position to work towards that. What it looks like, that's another question, and you know what, I think that's another whole conversation that we don't have time for today, probably.
Counselor Scott.
So I guess bottom line, would be great to know what the cost is. The other thing is, what can we do to be effective? Do we need to start petitions? Like, this is one of the largest galleries we've had for a long time. So obviously it's something important to the community. There's a lot of people that live here just for the ATVing, the backcountry snowmobiling. And there are a lot of people that come from Grand Prairie, Fort St. John. And they're, you know, regardless if these roads are decommissioned, there's still going to be people trying to access, you know, the Wolverine area, regardless of whether the road is there or not. It may take a few more jerry cans or whatever to get out there, but, you know, they're still going to be going in. What can we do to be effective having these roads put back to being useful?
So I think you're doing a lot of it already. I mean, you know what, for one thing, the information that you've provided me already goes up to our, through our executive, up to our assistant deputy minister. Our deputy minister will know about this, and so that's happening at that level. You know, and what the deputy minister decides to talk to the minister about is up to them, so I don't know beyond that. But you know, one of the things that we are been very effective on is that we have communicated upward that there's an issue here, that it's going to take some additional dollars to resolve it, and so there's that awareness. But I don't think there's, you know, I would say that you need to consider doing whatever you feel is the right thing to do for the community, and not necessarily, because I've done what I've pretty much done. Everybody's aware provincially that we have an issue here. In terms of how that turns on to being, you know, additional funding or anything like that, is completely nothing that I deal with, other than asking for the request. And then in previous years, it's gone denied. So it's just keep that in mind, and I think you're doing a lot of it.
Are you funded enough to come up with a cost?
No. So realistically, we can give you an estimate of cost, but what you really want to do is you really want to do a workup of the entire, you know, the area, because we're talking 5 bridges. Well, if one of them's good, that you could utilize it for a while, and then timing over time, then it's not, you know, $1 million over 1 year, but it may be $1 million over 5, you know, or those type of things that you're going to want to do. Plus the aspect, and one of the conversations I've had with my engineer, Rob, who came out here with that meeting, Arisman, and went with Mark, is that we need to start identifying, and you guys mentioned it earlier, this isn't the last road where we have this issue, and there's going to be other issues like this, and we need to get a plan put together about what that looks like. But no, we don't have that kind of base funding or opportunity. We can give you an estimate, but realistically, that won't solve the problem for you and really what you need.
When we were down at UBCM, this new NDP green government, they were very interested in the geopark stuff. And so I think we haven't even approached them for anything really, but I think we can go down there and maybe get their attention and maybe surprise you. I think maybe we can get some funds.
So the only suggestion I would like, you know, to make for that is that you actually tell, you know, if you're, you know, because one of the things we always find is that, you know, when public and yourselves are talking to the ministry, you're talking about all the things we're not doing. It'd be nice once in a while that you would actually tell that you're actually working with us on this, because that's what we think we see it is. And a lot of times it comes out negatively, and we end up having to do is spend a lot of resources in writing response letters that realistically, you know, that we're already doing these things, and you get information that is, well, you already knew it, you know, that type of thing, just to keep that in mind.
So I can say you're backing all this. I can say you're backing rebuilding all these bridges.
So backing it would be, what do you mean?
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, it's definitely a good idea. I'm completely supportive of the opportunity to try to open up this area again. It makes complete sense to me, and it's a valuable resource. It's just we need to figure out how to continue to manage these resources over a long-term aspect, which we haven't done in the past. We haven't had the foresight to think about it.
Okay, Councilor McKay.
Well, you definitely got the unanimous support of this district in your endeavors to keep things open there. But the costs associated to the maintenance, you kind of partially answered that. I'm not sure, but but just the cost that you've already spent over, say, the past 5 years and the upkeep, is there any, can you give us some indication? So it's not only the repairing, but it's also the maintenance of them. Just what kind of an idea we're looking at. And the second option, is there another option of maybe replacing those bridges with something maybe far smaller that's more suited to what we're looking at? Like foot traffic, ATV, snowmobile, that type of traffic, and keep the trucks and things like that off there. Is that also another option we could be exploring?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, you know, there's an array of options that you can consider, right down to actually taking out a rec tenure that you actually have some actual responsibility and accountability for that land base, which in fact then you can actually, you know, once you have that, then you actually can identify some of those opportunities. In terms of the actual maintenance costs, interestingly enough, once we end up having a permit such as this, and we don't have people actually have a tenure over the road, we don't do maintenance. So what that road ends up being is in the shape that it is year after year, just continues to get worse and worse and worse. So those are probably part of the challenge. Now, we could probably go back to, you know, when the last time we had a tenure on, you know, an actual road tenure on there, but realistically that might be 10 years ago, and that's 10 years out of date, and it was probably minimal $20,000 a year or something to actually grade that road. But definitely, I think the aspect of you considering what those bridges and what that looks like is something that you want to consider and how you might do that. We don't, you know, from the district perspective, we don't need, based on what's going back in that area, we don't need full bridges that manage 60,000 tons. You know, an ATV is fine.
Just one last question. Is the logging and any exploration work done in that area, is it completed now, or it's finished?
So it's finished for the time being until somebody comes to us and approaches us and says, hey, by the way, we've got another interest back there. Nobody's done that. We've actually checked with Canuma, and we've checked with somebody else. Yeah, and they have no interest to go back there now. That doesn't mean it ends forever. That's the challenge, right? But yeah, for this time period, there's nobody interested in taking on that road permit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Worship. Just a couple of questions. So, we're talking about the Wolverine Road, correct? And in terms of coal prices, so on and so forth, they go up, mining starts here again for coal. And going up on the Wolverine Road, one of the largest deposits, if memory serves me right, is the Babcock area, which requires the Wolverine Road, so on and so forth. So what, if any, is it a matter until that happens, then the road will get fixed and improved so that people can get back and recreational use and all the rest of it? I mean, where does that come into the equation?
So just a couple of comments on that then would be, I mentioned earlier about, yeah, exactly. You know what, there would be nothing happening in that back end until there was. And then that would be the consideration at that time about, road permits and if they, if you wanted to open up it again. But if in fact, if all of a sudden there's a rec tenure or there's even a recreational aspect of this in terms of a shared use for the land, then that has to be part of the consideration about whether or not how we would open that road up and or whether it would be that road exactly the way it is now versus doing something different. So those are some of the conversations, but we're not, it's hard to speculate what that might look like, but those are some of the options and opportunities of having that kind of a dialogue.
So if we put it in the bridges, you obviously would be satisfied with that, if the district decided to do that, is that?
So at this point, if we walk down that, and head down that, we develop a plan and we all approve on that plan and endorse that plan and we move forward, yes, for sure, the district would definitely support.
That we would pay for it?
Well, I suspect the payment is whether or not where that comes from. I mean, I think you're going to have to look at grants and all different kind of opportunities where that funding comes from. I don't think it's going to be maybe I'm wrong, unless the community of Tumble Ridge is going to write a check for that kind of a fund.
No, I understand that part of it. So we end up doing that. We do get some grants. We get it fixed, and then you'll all be satisfied with that.
Yeah.
That fair?
For sure.
And that way you don't have to contribute anything yourself to it.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. I would just, if you're going to do that type of work, I think it'd be unwise if you didn't consider a tenure over that area, so that you actually have a right to it now, right?
Understand
That would be the important aspect.
So
You don't want
as-
to invest in something and then all of a sudden lose
So
the
as far
right.
as your involvement is concerned, your organization, you're finished with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I gotta say that, the regional district has, supported us in
Mhm.
everything that we're doing, they're saying it's a letter. I get out of this, that you take the Canusa Falls Road. Had it reclassified.
Yeah, last year.
That's kind of what we have to do here, before we get any maintenance on it.
So I don't think it's the same process. I think that the reclassification on Canusa was that we had road permit users, we had, partly was with Ministry of Transportation on that road. So what we did is we just converted it all over to Ministry of Transportation, of which then Flynn Rowe ourselves exchanged another road that we were gonna maintain that they are maintaining up here with Maudie. And so that's what we did. So it's a different process, and I think that's the conversation. It's because that's an active road and it has it had actually tenure holders holding the road permits, then it's a different one.
That only took 15 years, so.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Greg, if we were to apply for a rec tenure, do you have to apply for that for each individual road? And then if we do that, are we liable for anything on that road from that point on?
So I'm gonna ask Mary Ann to answer it because she's probably my tenure gal. Hopefully, there you go.
With the rec tenure, it's actually not an area I'm as familiar with. But yes, basically your rec tenure, there'd be some sort of insurance, so liability insurance that goes with that would be held by the tenure holder. But the Rec and Trails Division also would have some responsibility potentially with that as well, if you've done it sort of a joint venture between the two.
So then again, if you were gonna go for a rec tenure, you have to, each road is individual, or if we were just using the geopark boundaries just as a guide, you could encompass the whole in a rec tenure?
If you were doing more like a commercial recreation tenure under the Land Act world, you could do an extensive use boundary of the whole geopark with intensive use areas identified where higher maintenance would occur. There is that option. Or if you're going through the Rec Trails program, which is more Trevor Hanna's shop, then that would be more on a trail by trail basis.
Go ahead.
So if the community had a rec tenure on this road, what happens in 5 years down the road when they wanna log out there, now the logging companies wanna go back down that road?
So that.
Charge a toll?
So that becomes, so one of the things that we always do in terms of, anytime we have another tenure request or road request, then it becomes, we do what we call statusing. And then we have to find compatible use. And so in other words, we consider all the investment on the land base, and that's where I was saying, we may in fact say, no, that's off limits, you're gonna have to move this road to go somewhere else. Or, no, they've come and they've talked to the community itself, and they've reached an agreement on this, and you're fine with them upgrading the bridges and upgrading to a different standard and allowing now truck traffic into the back and all those type of things. So there's all kinds of different options in here, but it virtually, once you make this investment, and if you have that type of a tenure, we honor that, and we have to find compatible use, so it's kind of a different conversation, and that's why I say it gives you rights into that.
And has something changed in the last 15 or 20 years with this fish-bearing streams or whatever, that you're not allowed to use culverts anymore for these river crossings? Because, for instance, on the road to Chetwynd there, we had a culvert that was there for 30 years, plugged up one time, and now we've got a temporary bridge there that they're probably spending $5 million to replace a culvert, when that could have just thrown a culvert in there and filled it back in. I don't quite understand why the government's going off in that direction. They did the same thing on the way to Dawson Creek. A couple of culverts washed out. Instead of spending, $60,000-$80,000 to fix that up, they spend millions of dollars. Is it the same thing with that road out there? We couldn't just throw culverts down in the river and cross it?
So legislation changed in and around late 90s, actually. So it's been a considerable amount of time when they did, and in terms of actually fixed around fish access. And at that point in time, a lot of work was done during the Forest Practices Code days, which is not under the current legislation we have now. But what happened is it identified a number of different type of acceptable structures based on the size of creek, the type of fish, all those type of things. And so you got to the place where we started to have round bottom culverts were were not something, it doesn't hold enough substrate. And so that's part of the problem. You start going to bottomless culverts and bridges and all those type of things because of the fish passage issue, so that we have that. So that legislation has changed.
Okay.
I got one more. You know, it's hard to expect the taxpayer of Tunbridge Ridge to put bridges in. But you talk 10 years, the geopark, they took a 10-year out on that. Then they could go after grants for repairing some of that stuff. And that, to me, that makes a lot more sense than trying to talk taxpayers into paying for bridges on a road.
Yeah.
So I think that would maybe be a direction we could maybe look at. Have you heard of the? I'm sure in Banff, Jasper National Parks, they don't just go in there and close roads. There are bridges out. You know, it's we're a park. You know, we should have a different designation than what. Oh, this road's not used for logging anymore, so we're just going to shut it down.
Yeah. So, you know, and I'm not familiar at all with the Alberta legislation, so yeah, I'll leave it at that. But, you know, in terms of, you know, the geopark its status is not the same as a national park or a provincial park and that type of thing. And, you know, so I think those are some of the conversations on, you know, around the options we want to, you know, you'd want to consider, and how you might be able to partner with ourselves or, you know, beyond to say how to make this work better. And those are the things we'd investigate, because yeah, the answers are yet to all be there for us yet. We still have to look for them, and you know, this is new. Geopark here, what are you? They're only the 6th in the world, so I'm not sure that they, you know, everybody's got quite the understanding of it also, so I think that's the other side.
It is a possibility. Yeah. No, excuse.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just one other question. How many bridges? You mentioned 5 bridges?
So I know that there's at least 5, and I'm not sure there might be, I think it's 5, but don't hold me to the number, it might be 6, or, you know, that type of thing, right? So, and they're all built in the same, you know, during the same 2 to 3 to 5 year period. So they're all heading in the same, you know, they're all pretty much in the same place, right?
And those 5 bridges, or 5 to 6, or whatever it happens to be, would take you right up to the tunnels,
That takes you right to the end of the road.
right to the end of the road. Well, you know the tunnel area? The road.
No, I don't.
Oh, okay, well, the road goes beyond that as well, but anyway. So all of those 5 to 6 bridges need to be replaced, did I understand correctly?
At some time. Now, we haven't done an evaluation on, you know, we know that there's a bridge in there right now that the substrate is only about that far from the bottom of the bridge. In other words, that it got pushed by a flood. The next time we get a freshet, we're not sure that bridge is going to, you know, stand up. And we're not 100% sure, you know, when the other ones are ready to go. We know that they're probably close, and they need to be evaluated, right? And that's the aspect of what, you know, I think some of the work is. I mean, we have looked at the first 2, and we know that they're definitely a problem.
So, again, in terms of the financing side of it, it's the district's responsibility to go for the grants, see if we can do anything about that. And what do you people do?
We can support you through, you know, through the process of maybe through the, you know, making the right kind of decision. You know, what is it if you're looking at a 10-year? What kind of opportunities? What are the risks? Those type of things. We can help you through that. We can connect you with potentially different funding pots like rural dividend and things like that. We can also endorse and support your project proposals. So those are some of the aspects.
So the 5 to 6 bridges, yeah, do you have an estimated cost of what that would cost?
Well, I said, yeah, right now we're probably talking 2 bridges at least for $200,000, but that's going back to actual bridge. So if you're going to something much smaller, you know, an ATV or something else, then you're extending your money. But I would say if you're looking at 5 bridges, you're probably looking close to somewhere, if you're building them back to the same standard they're at now, you're probably somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million.
So $500,000 to $1 million. So until that's done, the road is closed. Is that it?
So until we can come up with some solutions, and you know, at this point, the road's closed through the winter. and we hope to be able to start having additional conversations about what options we can do, and we see if there's some aspects of what we can actually propose and see what we can maybe get implemented. It's gonna be really challenging, I'll be upfront, it's gonna be challenging that we can get through this process to do something with additional bridges and that type of thing, when you're talking about you needing, potentially engineering reports and all those type of things to get to, and drawings and all that, to get through this fiscal, that we'd actually even be able to have something ready to go next year even. So that's part of the challenge, is that, it's closed now, but it'll be closed until we actually have something that we can replace, and then we know that we've implemented something that's safe.
So the road, the Wolverine now, going up is closed.
It is, correct.
And does that goes, is it closed right from, does it go closed prior to getting to the mine site?
No,
How far in? Or,
about around 30 kilometers approximately. Because the road closure sign comes up right across where the railroad tracks is. That's the first one, so I'm not sure exactly what kilometers that is.
That's 20. Sorry? 20.
Thank you, Worship. Greg, we realize these two bridges are the main concern, but do you have an update or a status on the Windfall, the Wapiti, Barber Creek, Club Creek, or Perry Creek, or anything else that might be a major concern coming up close that we're gonna look at anything?
Not today.
Not today, okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think sled bridge or an ATV bridge probably satisfy 99% of the people around here. But, see, maybe I'm wrong. So if we're all finished here, so open it up to, yes, sir.
I'm just wondering what part Canfor plays in all this. They're taking hundreds of millions of dollars worth of timber out of here. The bottom end of the road, they changed the bridge overnight so that they could haul out at 8.5. Maybe they should be participating in the cost of the road. I'm sure they have lease up there, don't they?
So in terms of the road permit itself, there's no one holds the permit themselves, so that virtually it's vacant. So there's no responsibility by Canfor on that aspect. No one's planning on going behind that in the back end of the Wolverine or utilize it for development purposes. So at this point, there would be no responsibility that we could actually ask for Canfor for anything.
I think it's something once we decide what we're doing, we could go to Canfor and say, do you want to?
Well, without a doubt, I mean, they could be you would definitely want to have that conversation about a partnership or something like that with that. Maybe they would come out for sure.
Randy Cutler, TR Ridge Riders. First of all, we do have a tenure with Wolverine already.
Okay.
The second thing is the small bridges is a great idea, but it doesn't help us in the long picture because we cannot groom a trail with the small bridge. We can't use our cabins for repairs and other things. And what happens when loggers come? If they do, they pull those bridges out and then let start over again. The second question I got for you is, if we come up with the money for repairs of these bridges, who looks after the road after that?
So virtually, again, the maintenance of the road, because we don't have a tenure on it, that isn't borne by the province again, right? And there is no tenure holder on the road, then the maintenance would have to be part of the consideration.
So then somebody has to take over the
Yeah.
maintenance, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
And as a club, we don't have the funding to
Yeah.
take that over, so we need somebody big company.
Yeah.
That's where I think the geopark might come in, is that get it classified as do tourism stuff, rather than just each club, It might carry more weight.
Yeah, because without grooming the trails, we cannot collect fees really. So.
I know.
Good point, Tim. Thanks for that.
Could the club's ATV, snowmobile, and that, could they not go to all our other clubs in Alberta and that come over here and approach them on getting in on this and participating in putting in the bridges and the tenures and that? The only thing I've got a real problem with the district, if they do a tenure and do that road or the bridges, then the district's gonna be liable for everything that goes on up that road. So there could be a lot of lawsuits that come against the district on that if we hold the tenure. That would be my biggest worry and fear on that.
I agree with you. Anybody else?
Section of road that's not part of one of the bridges, maybe 40-some kilometers, that's kind of slumping away. Did you guys have a look at that? Get an estimate or a ballpark on what that would cost?
So we're aware of the slide on the road, and it's part of the road report that we have. In terms of doing a cost estimate, because really what we would do is, again, is minimal amount of effort or work towards that, because we don't get funded for that. But yeah, we're aware of it, but we haven't done a cost on it.
Yes.
So it's kind of a question, it's not, but from my understanding on the last meeting, you guys were pulling the bridges to deactivate the roads. And now you're saying that you're pulling the bridges because they're unsafe, so I kind of like a little bit of clarity, because we were understood that you were deactivating the road and you guys were gonna repair the bridges to pull the bridges. We
So-
raised the question of just leave the bridges in once you guys repaired them.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So the aspect is that when initially what we did, when we knew there was a problem, we put cement barriers up across the road and that type of thing to try to keep access and out of there because of the safety issue. And then the barriers then were removed by whomever. And so the next conversation that we had at the district is, well, I personally own that as government own that liability that you're talking about right now. And so the point being is Rob's coming to me and saying, well, we need to do something to limit that liability for you. And so that's when we talked about pulling the bridge. And we were actually gonna stand the bridge up on end virtually, that you wouldn't be able to get access beyond that. And then the conversation happened that we said, well, after the meeting, what's happened is that people are saying, well, what about if we could just get ATV or snowmobile traffic to go across that? And I agreed with that and said, yeah, let's go ahead and see what we'll maintain what we've got right now, keep the bridge in there, we'll get that report to find out whether or not that's an opportunity, of which we found last week now it's not. So really, we're back to the place where we'll actually now have to consider how we actually pull that bridge to make sure that we limit all access back there.
But what we said in the last meeting from you guys was that you were pulling all the bridges, not one. You're fixing the bridges to get to that bridge, it's at kilometer 54 or 51, and pull the bridges on your way out.
Yes.
That's what we got, because we brought up the question of why can you not put the bridges in, leave the bridges, and we'll take over after that.
So the road in itself, what happens is when you get to this place where you're the safety is the issue and those type of thing, we get it. What I forget exactly the name. I think it's an emergency funding that we can actually get into from the province, and virtually the expectation is that you eliminate that liability to the province, and so that's the aspect of going in and pulling any funds.
And a couple other pieces to that is a couple of the bridges where the abutments are currently failing. Those structures now, because the scouring along the banks that's happened over the years, are too narrow for that section of creek, for those sections. So we can temporarily put those bridges back in, fix them to go back into the back end and remove the other structures. But we can't leave those bridges in long term. It goes back again to the question around other requirements. So it's only a temporary replacement.
Okay.
So,
But can you not add material to extend that so you can put the bridges in safely?
we'd have to go and actually acquire longer bridges in this case.
So you can't actually put material into that bridge back in?
In the case of the two bridges where there's abutment issues, yeah, they require actually longer bridges.
Really?
Is what I've been, is what I understand in this case.
Seems kind of weird that you can't build on and put the bridge back in.
We're not the engineers.
We tried to get them. So another thing, you guys were talking about cost, so why don't you take that $20,000 and hire the proper people to assess what needs to be done and cost estimates for the district itself, so that we're not taking that on.
So originally, the $20,000 we transferred over, we were going to look at hiring an engineer to go look at it. Now, Ridge Riders have had some conversations with one of the engineering firms to provide an answer on that for the time being. So alternatively, the REC program through Trevor Hand is going to be taking that funding and looking at, again, alternate options, and I believe he was looking at potential conceptual plans for what options were to be moving forward with a potential bridges or something of that nature that would work for those size crossings.
But we could use that money to do
Yes.
the study of how much it's gonna cost to repair.
Well, I'd have that conversation directly with Trevor because we've actually just transferred that funding to him, and so it's up to him to make that decision now.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you all.
You'll be hearing from us.
Oh, I'm sure.
Seven point three, meeting schedule updates, that's, P&P's been added to the meeting schedule. I think that's the only change, Mr. Walk?
So,
Everybody's okay with that? Very
Recommendation that council approve the 2016 meeting schedule as presented.
All in favor? Okay, we have to go to a closed meeting. Not on here.
Question and answer over.
Yeah, so unless anybody's got any more questions for us?
Just, excuse me, on this, the Grizz Fest, can we talk about that, or? Is it part of the meeting?
Yeah, it's part of the meeting.
Yeah. Okay, so, am I right on the outcome of what's come so far, is that the district's going to give, Grizz Days, or whatever Grizz Fest, what it's called, $40,000, like cash instead of services. And then they want another $50,000 on top of that. Plus the setup of.
No, the 50,000 hasn't been agreed to yet.
Okay, wow.
But the
okay.
setup of the tents and.
But now, okay, when you're doing that, and you're setting up the tents, because you're doing that, then the district is liable for anything, insurance and that, if something's to happen with those tents, or there's collapse or windstorm, anything. Instead of, so they'd have to take out that insurance on top. Correct.
Well, that'd be the normal insurance policy they have on that, I would imagine.
Yeah, but if you're, I'm just saying, if you're giving all that responsibility over to Grizz Fest Committee, and they decided they were gonna hire someone else to do it because, well, I guess they wouldn't because they're really good for that anyways, right?
Yeah, this year.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, are we closed? Yeah, it's not on there.
So move. Do you need a motion, your worship, or?
need a motion. to
Thanks
go
for
to
coming.
closed.
Motion, second. Counselor Mackay, all in favor? Take 5 minutes, then we'll go to close.